A committee looking into Labor's Anti-Corruption Commission bill will begin hearings today before the legislation is voted on in Parliament. The government argues it's got the balance right on how much power the Commission will have and the threshold it's set for public hearings. The Shadow Attorney-General, Julian Leeser, joins me now. Julian Leeser, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Patricia. Good to be with you.
Now, the opposition has largely agreed the balance is right on the legislation, but you've called for a superior court judge acting independently to have the final say over whether hearings should be made public. The Attorney-General, Mark Dreyfus, says that could bog down the Commission in litigation and could be considered as gross interference. Do you stand by that request?
Yes, Patricia. We believe that the National Corruption Commission needs to have in place proper safeguards to ensure that it functions. This is not the first anti-corruption commission that we've had. In fact, we benefit from the fact that every state and territory now has an anti-corruption commission, and we've got 30 years of experience of how these commissions operate. So it's important to learn from the problems that have been experienced by the state commissions and take the time to get the balance right. I mean, there are extraordinary powers that these commissions have, including the abrogation of legal professional privilege. You don't have the right to silence. The privilege against self-incrimination is abrogated. And we've seen many people's reputations unfairly trashed and prosecutions fall over or not result as a result of these hearings. So we support the position that's been advocated by the South Australian Bar Association, which says that, yes, the government is right to have exceptional circumstances being one of the issues that is considered in relation to holding a public hearing. But because ultimately the Commission will have an interest in having public hearings because, this is a $200 million commission. They want to show that they are actually doing their job. We think it's important to have an external person in a superior court judge determining whether the balance is right.
Is that a deal breaker for you?
Well, what we're doing is looking at the range of safeguards that have been put forward in the bill in the context of this committee, and we are looking at the many submissions that have been made. Well, I know Mr Dreyfus says that he thinks his bill is practically perfect, but that's not the view of organisations like the Law Council or the Queensland Council of Civil Liberties or the Queensland Law Society or the South Australian Bar. It's also not the view of both the current inspector of the Victorian ICAC or the former inspector of the New South Wales ICAC. You say that, but on the day that it was announced, your leader, Peter Dutton, said that the balance was broadly right with this, and now you've suggested this, which is actually a substantial change. Why did he say that it was right and now you want to change this in quite a fundamental way? The leader was asked quite rightly in relation to the balance relating to exceptional circumstances. And we think in relation to that the government does have the balance right, that is a good thing that they've put exceptional circumstances as one of the factors that should be taken into account in relation to the legislation. But we should remember about this Corruption Commission, there has not been an exposure draft that's been put forward. Labor has brought their bill in the last few days of the last sitting of the Parliament. Submitters to this committee that starts its hearing today have really only had a week to prepare submissions, and they're only having 4 days of hearings. These commissions are very powerful, and it is important that adequate safeguards are put in place. Exceptional circumstances being as part of the test is important in terms of the balance between people's reputation and the importance of things being held in a accountable manner. But we feel that there are additional safeguards that can be put in place, including having an independent judge weighing up the relevant factors.
If this isn't supported, and given crossbenchers already find exceptional circumstances too high a bar, it seems unlikely. Is this, if the government doesn't agree to this, is it enough to lead to your withdrawal of support for this?
Well, we're going to be looking at the full range of safeguards that have been suggested by submitters to this process. There's a bipartisan committee that includes members of the opposition, members of the government and members of the crossbench, and we're going to let that committee do its job and try to hammer out what is the most important set of safeguards. But, Labor and the crossbench have a strong record in terms of protecting civil liberties, and I'm just surprised that they are not more at the forefront of raising issues around the protection of civil liberties, given the 30 years of experience and given the very negative experience that has occurred in some jurisdictions. We support an anti-corruption commission. It was our party that brought in the first ICAC in New South Wales over 30 years ago. But what we need to do is to take that experience of the 30 years that we've had and ensure we've got the safeguards right. And that's what we're going to be trying to do through the work of this committee.
The coalition is yet to determine a position on the voice to Parliament. That's the Indigenous voice to Parliament. Are you still considering a position, or will each member and senator make their own choice, just like happened with the same-sex marriage postal survey?
Well, look, these will ultimately be matters for the party room, Patricia, but we still maintain our position that we are awaiting the detail. You know, I was in North Queensland last week, in Townsville, in Rockhampton. I was with the leader in Palm Island, and like everywhere else, when we talk to Indigenous leaders, when we talk to non-Indigenous people, people don't know very much about what this body is going to do. They don't really know much about the body in the first place. So I think the government still has lots of work to do. They still need to provide us the detail about how the national body will work. They haven't provided us any process by which we can discuss the amendments that were put forward in the Prime Minister's speech at Garma. They seem to be, focused on doing all sorts of other things rather than focusing on the model, which is critical in terms of the detail. I mean, there is even talk about changing the rules by which referenda are run at the moment. But I think the real focus needs to be on the model, and it needs to be on providing a process where all Australians can engage.
But what I want to know, because the question actually was, do you think the party needs a unified position, or is it acceptable to you for everyone to go it alone? Some will be yes, some will be no.
Well, I think ultimately that's still a matter for the party room, and much of that will be determined.
What's your
based
view?
On. Well, look, I don't want to preempt a view at this stage because we don't have the detail from the government.
Okay, so is it detail dependent? Look, I'm just confused because there are some very, very passionate no campaigners on your side, as you know, and there are some passionate yes campaigners. So how are you going to resolve that ultimately?
Well, I genuinely think that this is part of the government's challenge here.
No, it's your challenge. I'm asking you about your political party. How are you going to resolve it?
With respect, Patricia, people in my party who are raising concerns that are in the broader community as well. And I think one of the things that the government needs to do here is to listen to some of those broader concerns and work out in the model that they put forward and in the way in which they're going to deal with the amendment, how they can try and bring all Australians on board. I mean, my view on this is that I've been a long-term supporter of the idea of the voice. But I think the key issue here is what is the government doing to address the concerns that are being raised? Because at the moment, you've had the sort of three sentences at Garma, you've had some Indigenous consultation groups established, you've had the Shaquille O'Neal stunt, but we've had very little detail in relation to what the bodies will actually do. And I think the government needs to listen to the concerns being raised, not just by my colleagues, but by others, because if we're going to have a successful referendum, they need to bring all Australians.
You say the government, but actually isn't it the Parliament that will co-design with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders what a body would look like? Shouldn't you also be doing some heavy lifting around this?
Well, it is the government's bill that will come forward for debate in relation to this, and I've had lots of discussions on these matters with Pat Dodson and with Linda Burney and other government members about this. You'll note I haven't been out there running a commentary on this more broadly because I think it's important to give the government space to do this, but ultimately there will be a parliamentary process. But we believe that the government should be doing more to engage Australians and to engage with the real concerns that people are raising.
Just very quickly, a UN body is in Australia visiting detention facilities, jails, but the New South Wales government has refused to allow investigators into their jails. Should they let them in?
Look, I'm not completely aware of this. It's ultimately a matter for the New South Wales government.
They've signed up. They've signed up to this. Should they allow those inspectors in?
I think broadly, having inspections of facilities is a reasonable thing to do, but I'm not aware of the specifics around this, and I think that ultimately is a matter for the New South Wales government.
Julian Leeser, we're out of time. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Patricia.
Shadow Attorney General Julian Leeser there.